Donald Trump essentially got bullied for 90 minutes. He got outmastered at his own game.
People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats.
He was taunted. He was dragged around the room, and he fell for it. And that was the pattern of the evening, really. He essentially would be provoked, and he would get angry. And that was great for Kamala Harris.
I am delighted to welcome back in his new guise as US correspondent, Freddie Hayward. Hello, Freddie.
Hello, how are we doing?
Very well. How is life treating you stateside?
It's good. It's good to have another election to cover. It's very exciting.
I want to pick your brains about the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and whether that's shifted the dial at all. How's it feeling kind of 48 hours on in the States? Has anything moved?
We've not yet had the polling. That's obviously going to take a few weeks to come up because you need to do the field work after the fact. But the atmosphere is, as it has been for a while, a lot of Democrats getting lost in their love and hysteria for Kamala Harris. And I'm not sure how much that translates into voters. I mean, if you look at the fundamentals, what are they? Essentially, Donald Trump is ahead on the two biggest issues for voters right now, which is the economy and immigration, just as we saw in the UK election. And she didn't speak that much about those two issues during the debate. So she is not really addressing the fundamentals. So that's a risk for her. At the same time, she had an amazing debate where she came across as strident, confident, eloquent. She had a very rocky start. Her voice was shaking. She was slightly nervous. But then after the abortion question, which she answered extremely well, she was able to just bait Donald Trump. So Donald Trump essentially got bullied for 90 minutes. He got outmastered at his own game. He was taunted. He was dragged around the room, and he fell for it. And that was the pattern of the evening, really. He essentially would be provoked, and he would get angry. And that was great for Kamala Harris.
And some quite extraordinary comments, even by Trumpian standards.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs. The people that came in, they're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
It's quite stunning, no? That is the takeaway for me. That's the takeaway from the whole debate.
Yeah, completely. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it shows how much he is focused on the online right and where he gets his information. He was almost surprised when he was challenged on it by the moderators. He was like, well, I saw it on TV, so it must be right. And there hasn't yet been a verification of that. It's a sort of theory that's been going round. But I think, again, it shows a real risk for the Trump campaign. If they spend too much time inside X and Twitter, then they're going to get lost from these key arguments. Because you've got to remember that the key people that both campaigns need to win over in the swing states are often disengaged from politics. They're not on Twitter all the time looking at the arguments and the memes and the political irony that gets thrown around. They are completely disillusioned with politicians, so they're not going to listen to this sort of thing. So both campaigns at the moment sort of need to drop their obsession with the personality of the leader, I think, and try and go for those core little voters that aren't engaged with politics. And whoever does that, I think, will come out on top.
The Harris team seem very keen to go again. Presumably they think a clear win for their woman.
Yeah, I mean, it was. It just depends how much wins matter in terms of the election. Sometimes they do. We saw that back in the summer with Joe Biden, where he completely combusted. He couldn't speak. He froze. And that was fatal for his campaign.
Dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
So, yeah, they can really matter. And yes, you're right. They do think that Harris's campaign won. It seems that both teams want another debate. Trump came out afterwards and traipsed around the spin room and spoke to every journalist that he could get and essentially said that, of course, that he won. That's not a surprise. But he also equivocated over whether he would want to do another debate. So it seems there's a bit of dissonance, as we've seen throughout the campaign, between Trump and Trump's team. So we don't yet know. It could have been the only debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The only time they've actually met. That was the first time that they've ever met. So we don't know. I mean, they're currently negotiating. You got to remember these debates. They they have weeks and weeks of pre-debate about the format. So, for instance, this one, we ended up having mics muted. There was no audience. They were given 2 minutes each. Both of those, or all three of those conditions came from Joe Biden's campaign, and Harris's campaign tried to push for mics to be unmuted throughout, and they didn't get that. So there's a lot of rigmarole they have to go through to get these debates before they happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was another one. So let's see on that.
To what extent do you think the best thing that came out of the debate, well, for the Harris team, was this endorsement from Taylor Swift, aka Childless Cat Lady? I mean, the numbers on this are quite incredible, aren't they? 300,000 visits to vote.gov, seeking to register. Is that what people are talking about in the US? How much of an impact does it seem to be having?
I think it will have an impact just because, as you said, Taylor Swift has such a large following. I think the Harris team will be quite disappointed about the timing of the endorsement because it was on the day of the debate. It was minutes after the debate finalised when all of the attention was on the post-match analysis. So if it was slightly later or on a slow news day, so say it was today, you would have 2 or 3 days worth of talk about it, analysis. It would be the top of the headlines. And instead, it got a little bit subsumed by the debate. So I think they'll be frustrated by that. The reporting suggests that's because there was no communication between Harris's team and Taylor Swift. Again, a bit surprising, but it does seem that she sort of just watched the debate, watched Trump's lines and decided finally to endorse Harris. I mean, she did endorse Biden at the last election, we should remember, so it's not that surprising. I think many people would say that, I'm not an expert on Taylor Swift, I must say, but many people would say that some of her lyrics, her persona, lends itself to a more progressive party than it does a Conservative Party. So again, I don't think that's necessarily surprising, but I do think you're right. I do think it actually matters, and it sort of lends itself to the argument that the Democrats and celebrity in Hollywood have become one big party. We've seen that throughout this. Every single stage of this Democratic campaign has been infused with celebrity endorsements to the extent that it sometimes feels like you're watching a series of George Clooney adverts.
I mean, what impact can the young vote have on this election? How important is it to win that over?
Turnout is much lower among that group. That means they're less important in elections. Also, they're in urban areas which traditionally vote Democrat. They're not out in the rural parts of swing states, which will probably decide where they go. We know that, for instance, some of the key swing voters in those states are sort of around 40 to 65. That's one of the key demographics that both campaigns need to target. I mean, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter, of course. It just means that they're not the key demographic that both parties will need to look at.